something that I didn't know, and so I started researching kind of the history of Thanksgiving and some of the untold stories, or just what I didn't know already. And I was shocked. I started reading stories of massacres, atrocities, disease. I read a quote by Rush Limbaugh that kind of summed it all up in some of those articles that I was reading. We took their country from them. We started racism, sexism, bigotry, homophobia, spread syphilis, and basically destroyed their environment. I was shocked after reading this. I continued to read on, article after article, more and more stories like this. And then I read something that really shocked me. Did you know that marshmallows weren't invented until the mid-1800s? Why I found this shocking was that I didn't realize that all of the staple foods that we had been eating all these years were not anything that they had traditionally eaten there. So at that point, I switched gears. I decided I don't want to talk about anything, death, disease, murder, all of that stuff. And I went on to research the culinary evolution of what we now call Thanksgiving and what we eat today. So I found that very interesting that, some of the things that we look at today that we eat and we automatically identify as Thanksgiving, they weren't eating any of this. In fact, really the only thing that they ate that was the same as us, and there's really no exact documentation to say what they did eat, but there's a lot of hints that show what they could have eaten. The only thing that they actually did eat was turkey. Now when I think of Thanksgiving, automatically you think turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, stuffing, cranberry sauce. Again, as I said, they didn't have an exact lineup of what they ate that day, but there's a lot of things that pointed into the direction that they didn't eat a lot of the same things that we did. For instance, mashed potatoes. I didn't know that potatoes weren't even around back then. Potatoes were discovered by the Spanish in 1570. They brought it back to Europe. 1621, they hadn't been circled back to the U.S. at that time. So there was no way they could have eaten mashed potatoes. On top of the fact, they were very limited in the amount of butter that they had in order to make the mashed potatoes. Pumpkin pie. I always thought they had to have eaten pumpkin pie. There's a lot of research and documents that indicate, yes, the Indians and the Pilgrims did eat pumpkin in a much different way, though. Actually, at that time, they didn't have the wheat flour and, again, the butter to even make the crust. So there was no pumpkin pie. Actually, the first documented recipe that in the U.S. was in 1796. It was by Amelia Simmons. Stuffing. Now, they did have stuffing, but not like you and I think of it. What they would do is they had access to mussels, a lot of mussels, oysters. They would stuff the fowl, the birds, with mussels and oysters because that was very expensive meat. So it would make the meal go a lot further because they actually was very easy for them to get the mussels and oysters. They were everywhere in New England at that time. They also did stuffing of nuts and onions, which they haven't actually. The only record of the stuffing as we think of it today is from 1792. There was a recipe by Richard Briggs. Cranberry sauce. I thought for sure they would have cranberry sauce. Now they did have a lot of cranberries at the time. However, they didn't have any sugar. The only sugar they brought with them on the Mayflower. At this time, they ran through all of their sugar, so they couldn't have possibly had sugar. I continued reading on, and one of the things that intrigued me was, how the food has evolved with the American country and with what we've had available to us as far as, our culinary evolution. I read a quote from John Lendorf. He said, when you say something is as American as apple pie, what you're really saying is that the item came to this country from elsewhere and was transformed into a distinctly American experience. And that's what I think Thanksgiving is today. It was started off with people wanting to celebrate friends, family, and prosperity, and that's what it is today. Thanks.